Hello and welcome to a casual look at Mothergunship. This is a kind of level-based, run-based FPS with some very minor rogue-lightish design aspects, as well as a kind of old-school feel and characteristic when it comes to the shooting and the gameplay. It's developed by Digital Grip as well as Terrible Posture Games, and Terrible Posture Games consists of one person. Previous to this one, he worked on a title called Tower of Guns. This game takes quite a lot of inspiration from that one. Considering he happens to be the director for this game, I don't find that to be particularly surprising. And just in case you aren't convinced, do consider the fact that the runtime for this game is labeled towerguns2.exe. Point made. Taking inspiration from your previous work is certainly not unusual after all, especially if it wasn't a failure, which Tower of Guns, as far as I am concerned, certainly was not. I have taken a look at this game before though, but it wasn't in the conventional casual look at format that I use today, and as such I thought that I might as well make an actual casual look at of the game, because I kind of wanted to do that. So it's really as simple as that. It's kind of nice to have covered both the games that he made. It was kind of a fun thing, I thought, so I'm going to do just that. So before I jump into the game, I'm going to have a very quick look at the option menu as per usual, and then we'll see what Mothergunship has to offer. So, to the options menu. I would say it has most things you would probably expect and desire, as far as I'm concerned. Fully rebindable keys, which frankly I would expect from a PC game, but it's not always the case, unfortunately. Gameplay, we have language options. This is of course the text. They do not have separate voice actors for all the different languages, I'm afraid. That's something that I haven't actually ever seen in a game, but there you go. In case you were confused, that is not what it means. Okay. HUD, customize that a bit. Screen shake magnitude, that's always nice to be able to tune down. That can cause a bit of motion sickness for those who are very sensitive to that, or it's one of the options that can reduce it, at least if you can tune it down. Otherwise, of course, FOV will be very helpful for those who suffer from any kind of motion sickness as well. And you can customize it here up to quite a lot, indeed up to 140 FOV, which is too much for me, but it's very nice that it's there. Otherwise, we have the kind of standard option menu, I would say. We have anisotropic filtering, anti-analyzing, lens flare, a few quality options, chromatic aberrations, as well as dynamic resolution as well. That's not very common for smaller games, I tend to find, but there you go. VSync, motion blur, you know, it's kind of the standard option menu there, I guess, it's a standard capable option menu. It can of course be worse, and it can be more extensive as well, but I think it does the job. When it comes to the audio volumes options, audio volume, yes, no, the audio volume options, it's quite good, honestly. It's a lot of customization here. You have separate audio volumes for UI, effects, weapons, music and dialogue. That's actually more than usual. Usually it's just music, dialogue, and then effects. But here they have actually separated effects with weapons and UI as well, which is kind of nice. Especially for such a small team, it's rather impressive, I suppose, isn't it? Other than that, we have the sensitivity options as well. You can have separate sensitivity for Y and X axis if you for some reason play with that, I guess. Do anybody do that? That seems horrible. There we go. Mouse smoothing on off. We are of course going to have that off. That sounds like a terrible idea. And you can invert the Y-axis as well, if you would like to. Does anybody play with an inverted y-axis? I've never met anybody who uses that. Let me know if you do. It'd be interesting. I can also delete my player profile. That seems like a terrible idea. Let's not do that. But that's pretty much it though. So let's just jump into the game and see what Mothergunship has to offer. Let's go.
Jasper was right. There was no catalog listing for the recombobulator, and no matching service number in their database. Where the heck did I get this magic reincarnation device?
Maybe it was a special thing only loyal customers got.
Okay, so welcome to my ship. So I'm thinking that I'm just going to show you a bit what's going on here, and then I'm going to jump into a mission and show you what the gameplay is all about. So first things first, this is the upgrade station. This is essentially where you spend your level points. So you will gain XP as you go through the missions, and you are going to, well, level up. You get these kind of level points, I suppose, which you can spend on various different upgrades that you essentially start the game with. So it will be things such as, well, movement speed, starting jumps, which is a bit of an odd thing. This is something that was the same essentially in Tower of Guns, in that you could get a very ludicrous amount of jumps. You can get jump upgrades, which was, well, they were stackable essentially. So you could get a very, very large amount of jumps, which was a bit odd, certainly. It is a bit odd, unusual, but yes. So that's the same thing here. You can get a very large amount of jumps. Otherwise, it's the kind of things you might expect. So we have energy, the recharge rate, as well as the max energy. The energy is essentially your weapon ammo or whatever. So that determines how much you can fire your weapon and how long it takes for that weapon energy to recharge, so that you can fire it once again. And then we have a few things like secret detection radius. Yes, there are secrets in the missions. They are basically just fake walls, and if you get close enough with such a reasonable radius, even if you have lower radius, they going to basically reveal themselves. If you have 0 here, you are going to basically have to just run through the wall without having that detected. So it's very useful to have that. That will actually reveal them. Otherwise, it essentially won't reveal them at all. So you just have to just face through the wall and hope you find it. So that's the level up system. We also have a shop right here. This place is an absolute rip-off. I can sell my items or weapon parts for 1 gold, or I could buy that same rarity part for 10. So yes, he has a 10-fold increase for his weapons that he sells, as opposed to buys, which is yeah, he's a complete rip-off, so screw that guy. Yes, so that's basically the overall progression in the game, the long-term progression, I suppose. It is that you will level up, you will earn money, and you will collect gun parts. So, without further ado, I think we are going to jump into a mission, and I'll show you how those works out as well. So let's do just that. So this here is the selection screen, the mission selection screen. We have a few different modes here. These are basically the extra modes. It's the sandbox and the endless mode, which is always nice to have those. Then we have the main missions. It does have a story, this game, yes. And then we have these, which is the kind of boss missions, and you are supposed to do all these and then destroy the Mothergunship. Now I have looped once in this game for this main mission, which is why I'm rank 1. But you are supposed to loop essentially multiple times. It's this kind of meta progression of looping more and, well, a number of times in order to get the true ending and whatever. and I've only done so once, but nevertheless, yeah. So I've sort of completed the game, but I haven't really gotten the true ending, and so on and so forth. Otherwise, aside from that, we also have the side missions, which can be a few different things. This is a nightmare mission, so this is extra difficult. I'm not going to do that while commentating, that seems like a horrible idea, so I am going to do this one, I think. And this one will reward me with a little bit of XP. We have these ones as well. This one has a predetermined loadout. These are a bit more unusual. Most main missions, both these, for example, they have a loadout which you can choose for yourself. That's the most common kind of mission. These are... I've only seen these on side missions, I think. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. That's pretty much it. If you do these missions, these are the rewards as well. So if you do the mission, you are going to start with these items. But you will also get them if you manage to win the mission. We are going to play this one though. And for this one, I'll get to select my own loadout. And I get to bring 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different parts into the level. Now, if I lose... and if I die in this level, I will lose that which I bring in. So it does have a bit of a risk-reward there. If you bring in all your, most powerful things, you are going to have a easier time. But you also risk losing all your stuff, which is certainly something to consider when making such a decision, is it not? Yes, indeed it is. So I think I'm gonna get that one, and I am going to bring one of these with me. These are quite good. They are a little bit unique in this game, honestly, for a reason which I will explain in a moment. And I think I'm gonna take a few caps perhaps as well. These are modifiers, as you see, so they will do something, more or less. I think we're gonna have one of these, and we are going to need another connector, I think, so that I can put more than one of these. So these connectors are really good, so I'm gonna take one of those. And there we go. That's my loadout. Let's launch the mission. Okay, so here we are, and here is the workbench, and you get to build your own weapon. Yes, that is the kind of main mechanic of this game, which is very exciting. I'm gonna put the machine gun here, and I'm going to put a heavy weight cap, I think. Yes. Maybe? Yes. And you can rotate them as well if you would be so inclined. Now, I said this machine gun was a bit of an odd one or unique in this game, and that is because it has kind of a hit scan. Or at least the bullets travel so fast that it's essentially a hit scan. And that means that the projectile velocity decrease that I got from that add-on isn't really going to be a problem for that gun, which is kind of nice. And let's take our dizzying mini rockets on this other side as well. And there we go. So yes, you do a wield. And both the weapons have separate ammo, or energy, as you see as well. So if I use the weapon on one side, it's of course going to drain the energy on that side, and if I use the other side, it's going to drain that side instead. And you have to balance that as you see fit. Okay, let's try and not die. Shall we? Yes, that seems like a good idea. Okay, so first things first. I said this was sort of roguelite-ish in a sense. And what I mean with that is that it has some of the kind of attributes of a roguelike without really having the roguelike mechanics of, well, permadeath and multiple runs and so on and so forth. So the way this game works, as you saw, is that you will go into different missions. This is a random... I think I'd rather take a normal room. You will go into different missions, and you will be able to take a loadout with you, and you are going to go into the mission, and you are going to have to finish that mission without dying once. If you die, the mission is over, and you don't get to repeat the mission. The mission essentially disappears. Unless, of course, it's a main mission, in which case, of course, yeah, you can repeat the mission. You have to restart the mission, though, of course. You don't get to respawn within the level. And you also don't get to keep your items, of course, that you collected during that run. So all the money and the XP and the weapon parts and stuff that you collected during that run, you are not going to get to keep. You will have to take in new items instead. So you kind of lose that run. So it's not really, I guess, permadeath in that sense, but it's still, well, you get one chance per run. And if you lose that run, well, then you have to restart the run and lose all the items you had collected during that mission, I suppose. And then there's these champion enemies as well. These are very annoying, because they take so much bloody damage. They really, really do. They take a lot of damage. But while I'm trying to hammer out these bosses, I guess I continue on my tangent here. Yes. So it doesn't really have permanent death, obviously, even though you have to restart the missions. But I suppose it's kind of old school, isn't it? A lot of old school games had you restart an entire mission as well, which is interesting. Yeah, there is no checkpoint or anything like that. So that's one thing, of course. But other than that, you also have this progression within the runs. So within each run, you are going to collect money and upgrades. As you've seen already from the secrets I've found so far, and I'm sure I'm gonna find a few more, I've gotten a few upgrades. A few of them were... what was there? I think there was an extra jump I got? No, I think it was something else. Was it maybe extra energy? Here's a secret anyways. This is more energy. Yes, this is a bit, gives them a bit extra energy, which is kind of nice. I might as well go here, but I can go into here first. You also get money, as you've seen. I've collected a few golden coins, which you can use to buy different weapon parts. Basically, upgrade as you proceed through the game. Which one will I get here? Let's get the rapid blaster and put it together with my my rocket thing. There we go. That should be good. It is incredibly horrific in its spread, but you know, it'll do. I'm sure I can handle it, and if I can't, well, you know, such is life. What can you do? These things are dangerous. Let's not jump in those. Let's continue then. This little present just means that I got 3 coins for going here. So that's basically that. So the missions themselves do have a little bit of progression in them. Much like a roguelike, of course. In roguelikes, you start your run and then you will level up and get items and so on and so forth throughout your run. When you die, of course, you lose your character and you will have to restart. It's not quite the same in this game, of course, because you have, for example, a consistent level. You don't lose your level. Your character levels up as you go through the missions. But you do lose things like your weapons. Well, if you die, that is. If you win, you take the weapon parts with you to your ship. Thing is, of course, there is a limit to how much weapon parts you can take into each run, as you saw. In this run, I could take in 5 parts. That means that if I manage to collect a shitload of parts here, it's not like I can just, oh, okay, well then a super powerful next run. No, you can only take a number of parts with you. Now, if I find a really, really good part, like a rare part that is very powerful, then yeah, sure, that is powerful. That will help me under my next run. And I'm also not certain why I keep referring to the missions as runs, but yes, that will help you out. But at the same time, of course, I can also lose it, that run, if I happen to die, which means it's certainly not a permanent upgrade. I said run again. I think I keep referring to it as runs because that's usually what we call the missions or runs in the roguelike, so I use the same word here. But yes, so you can transfer some of the power from your different missions, between the different missions. If you have, for example, a really good path, then you can take that into your next mission. But it's not a complete transfer, it's not really scaling in that sense. That being said, it's not necessarily the case that you will find anything particularly good. I am taking a lot of damage here, that's not very good. I am speaking while playing games, so I'm gonna blame that for my terrible performance, frankly. There you go. Let's try not to die. That would be pretty annoying. Something else that's sort of roguelike in nature is the idea of randomized runs, or randomized levels. Maybe we can find health somewhere? Here we go, that's a health upgrade at least. Now the health upgrade obviously doesn't give you full health, but it gives you a little bit of extra health, and that extra health is going to fill up. But yes, the game has a pseudo-random generation for the levels, so the levels are essentially assembled through a number of various pre-created rooms. So the rooms are pre-created and stuff like that, but they are assembled in a random order. And the idea of randomized levels and randomized maps is of course a bit of a staple in the roguelike genre. Now this is a bit of a problem, I don't have any health. Yeah, that's not great. Well, I suppose I'm just going to continue through one of these doors. I'm gonna take a normal room just in case. I don't really want to take a random room because that can be rather dangerous. You never know. Be very careful now. Very, very careful. Thank you very much. Be very careful. Jeez. I apologize for being a bit mute here. I am trying to concentrate on not dying horribly. That's a health. Nice. Okay, awesome. Okay, wonderful. It might be worthwhile to see if we can find some health here. No. For once, they don't sell health. Otherwise, I usually don't buy health because I don't want to spend money on something that doesn't help me necessarily, but let's buy that. Yeah, I'm not all too happy with that. I might be able to just put that. I think I'm gonna put it here on it. I think I'm gonna do this. In fact, I'm going to remove my my rocket launcher and put the saw blade launcher there instead. Yeah, that seems better. It's a bit more uniform in how it shoots, and it's less spread on it. So I prefer that. This combo is better, I think, right now. So let's go for that. Okay, yes, apologies. I am a bit distracted with the whole not dying part, apparently. But that's kind of what gives it this kind of roguelite-ish feel, without actually having the mechanics of being a roguelike. It is of course much less punishing as well, due to this very reason. It doesn't have the permadeath, and you don't lose quite as much when you die. You will lose what you took into the run, but you're not going to lose your entire character. In the same way, completing a run will grant you some kind of reward. There is a overall progression in the game. Holy crap, that was a lot of bombs. Jesus, dear lord. Yep, okay, they just kind of ganged up on me there. They had apparently coalesced for some reason. That's certainly dangerous. Let's be careful with not dying here. Okay. So it's kind of interesting. This kind of hybrid gives it somewhat of a... some of the aspects of a roguelike, but it's a bit like a less extreme version. It's a little bit less hardcore. You know, it's a little bit less extreme. You don't lose everything. Which I can kind of appreciate that. It's kind of nice. Now, other than that, I also said that it's sort of old school in a sense. Now, what I mean with that is that it has some of the kind of hallmarks of how you play in a old school shooter. It's obviously far from anything like a modern military shooter, let's put it like that. It has a lot of emphasis on movement, for one. You do not want to stand still ever in this game. There is supposed to be an enemy, I think. But I do not know where. You see, this is locked. Here we are. Is this a freaking boombot? How bloody annoying. There we go, I can buy health now. So if there's nothing else I want to purchase, I'm definitely gonna get that. Velocity and spread. That is quite good. Let's buy this and buy that, because I have enough money for both. Thank you very much. This is decreasing spread. I could... Let's see. This is kind of interesting. Let's modify this. Take and put on the Dissim rocket. These are the ones that have a lot of spread. But maybe if I put on this one, it will tighten the... Yeah, as you see. The spread is much less significant now, which is kind of nice. Yes, it very much emphasizes movement. You do not want to sit still ever. And it's very much the same as in, you know, something like Quake or Unreal Tournament. You don't really sit still much in those games. You want to move consistently. Strafing is very much a part of this game as well. You move faster in the air than you do on the ground. It doesn't have the kind of same strafing velocity you can gain in something like Quake. Absolutely not. But it has some of the aspects of it. It has a lesser degree of it. It has. So, definitely see some similarities there. Some aspects of it. Even if it's not quite extreme. Other than that, it's also the consideration of projectiles. As you see, most game bullets, such as those, for example, give me the health, thank you, are projectiles. This game is very much projectile based. So you can dodge most bullets if you're good enough, and you can also miss with your bullets very easily if you don't lead your projectiles and lead the enemy. If you do not predict where the enemy is gonna go, it's highly likely that they will simply avoid your shots. As simple as that. They move just as slowly as the enemy's shot, of course, so, you know, you have to be considering the projectile traveling time. That little heal bot is absolutely obnoxious, I have to say. The weapon I have right now, which is probably the most... I'm immune to this consideration and is has the highest traveling speed, or one of the weapons that has the highest traveling speed is this machine gun. It's essentially hit scan, it seems. But basically all other weapons in the game does have traveling projectiles, or projectile based. Yeah. So as you see, the kind of plasma gun laser shots, yeah, projectiles. The rockets are of course projectiles. The saw blades are of course projectiles. These cannonballs is projectiles. You know, essentially everything is projectile based to some degree, which is very much kind of old school in that sense. That was much more often the case back in the day. If you look at things like Quake and Unreal Tournament and stuff, we have the needle gun, and we have the rocket launcher, and we have that weird goop gun, or whatever the heck that was. But many of the weapons were projectile based, as opposed to hit scan. So that's another thing that's suitably old school, I think. The last thing, of course, that is kind of old school, I suppose, well, the last few things that is old school is that, one, you have a health bar. You do not have regenerative health, thank you very much, words. You do not have regenerative health, right? There is no bloody screen, so real. In this game, you have a health bar and you will have to keep it up. Otherwise, you will very much die. Do not get hit, thank you. You also don't reload your weapons. Now they have this kind of energy bar. Which is, well, you had ammo, of course, in most old school FPSs as well, and arcade FPSs. but you don't reload the weapons. The weapons do not have a reload. And I have one. How wonderful. Definitely not destruct button. Well, let's click it then, since it's definitely not a destruction button, right? Yeah. Oh.
Marvelous display of focus, recruit.
Indeed. I did quite well, thank you. And here we get a recap of what I got through the run, basically. So that's some of the things that makes the gameplay feel kind of old school. It has some of these kind of hallmarks of old school design, I suppose, that makes it feel a little bit like the shooters of old. It is, of course, a little bit different still. It's not entirely the same. Most, of course, old school shooters did not have the ability to jump 60 times or whatever. Usually you don't have 60 jumps, but you get the idea. I think technically you probably could get 60 jumps. There doesn't seem to be a limit to it, so I guess maybe if you play in Endless you could technically get that many. Who knows? I've never tried. I'm not particularly intrigued to do so either. It seems like a bit of a waste of time. Honestly. Okay. I think I'm going to show you a little bit of a main mission as well, to show you just a tad bit of the dialogue in the story, and then I'm going to wrap that up. Let's experiment a little bit with the weapons while I do that. Let's speak a little bit more about the game though. Because I have a tendency of not being able to speak while being assaulted by 5,680 different robots. It's funny how that works, isn't it? So this is just going to demonstrate how crazy you can make the different guns. These are all the weapon parts I have. And here I can just experiment with putting absolutely everything I could possibly want on a gun and see what the heck happens. This is a test, so obviously you can't take this into a run, but you can essentially just experiment a bit with the different combinations and see if it's, well, a good combination or viable combination or not. It's basically as simple as that. So let's just jam on a few different weapon parts. I have access to all the different weapon parts I have in my entire ship, so there's essentially no limits here. As you see, the weapon parts, by the way, have different rarities. So the blue and purple and so on and so forth. A somewhat interesting thing, though, is that the more powerful gun parts also take more energy to fire. So you will have to be a bit more concerned about your energy consumption if you're using the more high tier gear. So it's not just a straight upgrade, honestly, is it? Well, no, not really. Sure, it's more powerful and it is a better part, it is. But it does require a little bit more energy, to be fair. So it is a little bit of a balance of that. It's not a straight upgrade in the sense that it's just better in every single way. Because there is at least one minor disadvantage, which is that it, of course, drains more energy. Okay. Okay. So otherwise, the graphics are totally fine, I'd say. They, it looks pretty decent, certainly. It's not a bad looking game by any means. It's not the highest fidelity, I guess. It's rather stylized. It's very... I wouldn't say it's futuristic, really, because it honestly, it kind of isn't. But it is certainly kind of sci-fi to some degree, right? It does have this kind of interesting, very robotic, metallic aesthetic. Everything is just made out of heavy iron or metal, I guess. Everything looks incredibly solid, though, I do have to say. Like, everything is incredibly bulky. It's as if you're in some kind of world of battle tanks or battle fortresses, you know? Where everything is made of incredibly highly armored steel. It's a bit weird, but it's pretty cool. I don't know. It's absolutely serviceable. It does its job. Absolutely. I don't love it. It's not exactly my taste. But it's also certainly not bad by any means. I think it gets a little bit too samey and generic for me after a little while, because you have kind of seen the robot, and when everything is a robot, there's not that much variety, I guess. And I kind of prefer when there's a little bit more variety in the environment. I suppose that's kind of my problem. At the same time, achieving a very high variety in environment does take quite a lot of development time, and it's not necessarily even viable for smaller teams necessarily. And obviously this is kind of roguelike-ish in that it uses the same kinds of rooms over and over again, so I mean it kind of comes as a natural part of having a smaller team, I think. I'm also not super fond of the idea of having basically only turrets and robots, I have to say. I do somewhat enjoy fighting enemies for the most part. That is something this game has though, which is that everything is robots, and it was the same thing in Tower Guns. There's a very obvious reason I feel for this, and that is basically it's a heck of a lot easier to make a good looking, well animated turret or robot as opposed to some kind of alien zombie hybrid human or something like that. You don't have to make it look as biologically natural, and to animate biologically accurate movement is not an easy task, quite frankly. It is really quite difficult, and to make it solid is not an easy task, especially for smaller teams. But with all things considered and everything in mind, I think the visuals are rather reasonable. They're certainly serviceable, they don't look bad. The sound effects are okay. They aren't obviously realistic, and I don't feel they have that much impact, really. At the same time, the kind of stylistic choice, both in design and art style, it wouldn't really necessarily make sense to have incredibly impactful weapon sounds, I suppose. And it certainly wouldn't make sense to have realistic ones either, so I don't know. The sound effects are fine, they work, I don't hate them. But they are, I don't know, I usually like very heavy kind of sound effects for my weapons. This game doesn't really have that, but I think that's partly a stylistic choice. When it comes to the music, I think it's more or less fair enough. It's okay. I think it does very well as background music for a game where you're supposed to murder hundreds of robots, essentially. It's not something I would listen to by itself, but at the same time, that's not kind of the purpose of it either, I don't think. It is sort of made for purpose, I think.
Final shield ship. Don't waste time. Everyone here wants a piece of that Mothergunship.
Except me. I want nothing to do with it.
Well, you're not real. I mean, you are, but you aren't.
Thanks.
The real people can't wait to get on board that ship.
Yes. That's the voice acting, by the way. It's fine. I rather enjoy it. The story is mostly kind of silly. It has a bit of jokes, and they're sometimes amusing. I don't have anything against it, really. It's not obnoxious, which I very much appreciate. Sometimes games can be kind of obnoxious when they try to be funny. In my opinion, this game for the most part isn't. The story is rather light-hearted, and sometimes it's funny, and sometimes it's not, but it doesn't really matter. It's just a little bit of background dialogue for the most part anyways. Not particularly consequential. So I don't have anything against the story by any means. I think it's pretty nicely integrated. It's not intrusive for the people who do not care for it, and it's by no means offensive or annoying either. It's very out of the way for the people who don't care for it, which I do appreciate that. I think that's very much the best way to do a dialogue and do story in games, unless you really want to focus on the story, you know. If you want to really focus on the story and tell a serious story, then of course you have to focus on it, of course. But if that isn't the main focus of your game anyways, and if it's just complementary to the rest of the game, then yeah, why force it down people's throat if they're not interested? I don't think that's necessary. I don't find it particularly advisable either for that matter. So I like how they do that. Honestly, I do. I appreciate that. The items in the game just disappear, so you don't want to be all too passive, because that means that you might very well lose out on a bit of loot. And this loot is gonna be rather important if you wanna make it through your run, because again, you need that loot to be able to purchase things in the shop, so that you can get that little bit of within mission progression that I talked about previously. Alright, well, I think that's most of the things I have to say about the game, frankly. There isn't all too much to talk about. The enemies themselves are simple. As I said, they are essentially, for the most part, robots or turrets or towers or whatever. They are fine. They make for good targets, and they obviously work well mechanically. There's no problem with that. A lot of them are essentially direct copies from tower guns, but a bit improved in their visual appearance as well as their animation. And some of them are new, but a lot of the towers, especially a lot of those stationary tower things and stuff, the spin bots as well, those existed in the previous game. So those are very similar, but they do look a little bit better, and they do have better animations and so on and so forth. Okay, so what's my conclusion of the game? Well, I think it's rather fun. Now, it's not something I would really sit down and play for an extended period of time, over multiple hours at a time, but it is a kind of game I kind of have fun jumping into, doing a couple of runs, and then jumping out. It's very easy and quick to get into. You don't need a long time to kind of ease in and get into the game, and so on and so forth, as it would be with something like an RPG. At the same time, you have this kind of overarching progression, which means that you kind of feel like, you know what, yeah, I did progress a little bit. I did level up, for example. I did achieve and get some kind of new items and gun parts that was kind of cool, and that is going to be interesting to use in the future. Which is kind of nice as well, which you obviously don't really have in a roguelike. And at the same time, you do have a little bit of the feeling that you have in a roguelike, where you get this kind of within-run evolution as well. Which gives this kind of, well, it's a bit more significant, I suppose, progression within a shorter period of time. If you look at big traditional RPGs like maybe World of Warcraft or Divinity Original Sin, it's probably gonna take a little while for you to even feel like you really progressed a lot, to actually feel any kind of power difference. And meanwhile in other games, like for example maybe Bioshock or Prey, you kind of want to play for a while to really immerse yourself into the world and really kind of get into the world and live into your experience. For these kind of roguelike games, and for this one as well, you have this kind of within-run progression, so the progression you get for a rather small period of time is relatively significant if compared to other RPGs. And since the story is, and since the story and atmosphere isn't all too important, and even if it is, it's usually deliberately designed to not have to require you to play for a longer period of time to really get into the world and get the story. It's sectioned up into smaller parts and is constructed in that way, deliberately. And it's also, of course, worth mentioning that this is kind of the exception. Generally speaking, the purpose of a roguelike game is not to provide an immersive game experience, world and story. It's usually much more focused on instantaneous and immediate gameplay and action. Yeah, I had a decent amount of fun with it, honestly. And I definitely think that if you find it on sale for a decent price, I do believe it's worth a try, by all means. Me? I've been Dexter. And this has been a casual look at Mothergunship. Maybe I'll see you next time. Farewell.